Imagine for a moment that the book you hold most sacred, the one you turn to for guidance, inspiration, and perhaps even salvation, is not as fixed and unchanging as you might think. The Bible, revered by billions, is a collection of texts that have undergone countless revisions, translations, and interpretations over the centuries. This video will explore the complexities and nuances of the Bible, delving into the textual variations and historical contexts that shape our understanding of its teachings. By the end, you may be left with a different perspective on what you thought you knew. The Bible is not a single monolithic text, but a collection of writings that have been compiled, edited, and reinterpreted over centuries. This process began with the oral traditions of ancient communities, which were eventually written down and compiled into the texts we know today. The New Testament, for instance, is a product of the early Christian Church, which sought to document the life and teachings of Jesus Christ and the experiences of his followers. However, the path from oral tradition to written scripture is far from straightforward. One of the most striking examples of the Bible's fluidity is the story of the woman taken in adultery, found in John chapters 7 through 8, verses 53 to 11. This passage, which recounts how Jesus shows compassion to a woman about to be stoned for her sin, is a powerful illustration of his teachings on forgiveness and mercy. However, it is not present in the earliest and most reliable manuscripts of John's Gospel. Scholars believe it was a later addition, likely a genuine old tradition that was orally transmitted and eventually incorporated into the text. This raises an important question. Just because a story is not part of the original Gospel, does it mean it is not true? The same can be said in reverse. The story of the woman who anoints Jesus' feet with her hair, Luke chapter 7, verses 36 to 50, is an original part of Luke's Gospel. But that does not automatically make it factually accurate. The early church transmitted many stories, some of which may have been embellished or composed to illustrate Jesus' teachings. The truth of these stories lies not in their historical accuracy, but in the values and messages they convey. Another example of the Bible's textual complexity is the issue of divorce and remarriage. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke all contain sayings of Jesus on this topic, but there are significant differences between them. Mark chapter 10, verses 11 to 12 states that both men and women who divorce and remarry commit adultery, while Matthew chapter 5, verses 32 and chapter 19, verses 9 include a Matthean exception, allowing divorce for unchastity. Luke chapter 16, verses 18 combines elements from both Mark and Matthew, saying that remarriage after divorce is adultery, and that marrying a divorced woman is also adultery. The differences between the Gospels are further complicated by the variations found in different manuscripts. For instance, some manuscripts of Mark chapter 10, verses 11 to 12, suggest that divorcing one's wife is itself adultery, while others emphasize the act of remarriage. These variations highlight the dynamic nature of the text and the challenges of reconstructing the original sayings of Jesus. The early church played a crucial role in shaping the texts of the New Testament. The process of writing, copying, and transmitting these texts involved numerous scribes and editors who made decisions based on their understanding of the teachings and the needs of their communities. These decisions sometimes led to the inclusion or exclusion of certain passages, as well as the introduction of variations in wording and interpretation. For example, the Matthean exception in Matthew's Gospel may have been added to address specific concerns within the early Christian community, in a context where divorce was relatively easy and often used to exploit women. This exception could have been seen as a way to protect vulnerable individuals. The variations in the manuscripts of Mark chapter 10, verses 11 to 12, suggest that different communities had different understandings of the issue, leading to diverse interpretations and textual adjustments. While the New Testament presents a complex and dynamic textual history, the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Old Testament, has a different story. The Hebrew Bible is primarily based on the Masoretic Text, MT, a standardized text that was carefully curated by the Masoretes, a group of Jewish scribes and scholars who worked in Tiberias and other locations during the early medieval period. The Leningrad Codex, a complete text of the Hebrew Bible from the 11th century, is the primary source for most modern translations. The Masoretes were meticulous in their work, developing a system of punctuation and vowel points to ensure the accurate transmission of the text. This system, known as the Masorah, is found in the margins and footnotes of the Leningrad Codex and other manuscripts. Despite their efforts, the text is not immune to errors and variations, but the overall tradition is remarkably consistent. Textual criticism is the science of reconstructing the original text of a document based on the available manuscripts. In the case of the Bible, this is a complex and often contentious process. For the New Testament, scholars must compare multiple manuscripts, some of which date back to the 2nd and 3rd centuries, to identify the most reliable readings. This process is further complicated by the fact that different manuscripts often contain different versions of the same passage. For the Hebrew Bible, the task is somewhat easier due to the standardized nature of the Masoretic Text. However, scholars still consider other sources, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and the Samaritan Pentateuch, to gain a more complete understanding of the text. The textual complexities of the Bible have significant implications for how we interpret its teachings. On issues like divorce and remarriage, the variations in the text suggest that Jesus' original sayings may have been more nuanced and context-specific than we often assume. The early church's role in shaping the text means that our understanding of these teachings is influenced by the values and concerns of the communities that transmitted them. This does not mean that the Bible is unreliable or that its teachings are meaningless. Instead, it suggests that we need to approach the text with a critical and nuanced perspective, recognizing the human element in its transmission and the diverse interpretations that have emerged over time. The truth of the Bible lies not in its historical accuracy or textual consistency, but in the values and messages it conveys. The Bible is a living text, shaped by the communities that have treasured and transmitted it over the centuries. While its textual complexities can be challenging, they also offer a rich and dynamic source of meaning and inspiration. As we continue to engage with the Bible, let us remember that its power lies in its ability to speak to us across time and culture, offering guidance and wisdom for our lives.